Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm going to address two comments I got on yesterday's video. A video where I looked at and discussed the results of the poll that asked everyone to rate the latest episode of Ahsoka, and here are those results for anyone who missed the video or wants a refresher perhaps. Anyway, as usual, I also responded to some of the comments and asked for people who fell into those bottom two options, especially the terrible option, to tell us what exactly they're hating about it, since I didn't really get any comments that explained it on the poll. In other words, I wanted some genuine critiques that go beyond "it's Disney trash" or something along those lines, which, yeah, I got some of those on the poll. But I wanted to dig into what people really are finding not so enjoyable about this. Especially when it seems like many who voted are very much enjoying this series. Keeping in mind that I am not always, or even usually, all that kind to Disney Star Wars, so my audience tends to not always be that kind either. And yet, in this particular case, a lot of people do seem to be loving it regardless. Anyway, I did get two responses that I saw at least. There may have been more, but these are the ones I saw. And I'm just going to start out by reading both of them, and then I'll get to my response to what they had to say afterwards. And the first one comes to us from Kehama, who said, "Hey Thor, I keep seeing so much praise for this episode on your channel. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I watched it again. The whole thing. Such silly writing, no suspense. Did anyone expect Sabine to make the right decision when pushed to decide at the end? Why did leaving a droid outside to work on a ship make any sense when Ahsoka already felt a disturbance nearby? Who writes this? They were told to stay together. Did anyone honestly expect them to stay together? Why did the witch leave? To go up to the ship and prepare for departure? What departure? If the map is incompletely downloaded, there will be no departure. She just stood around on the bridge of the ship. I thought she was supposed to be powerful. This whole episode was so predictable, so poorly written. I don't even know these characters at all, and I knew exactly what each was going to do. Like they took a cartoon script to live action. It was really fun to watch impotent lightsaber fights, since we know Disney lightsabers have no effect on plot armor, but at least the pacing was exciting. The best scene in the entire episode was Sabine pretending to use the Force, then going full Mandalorian. The music, so powerful and reminiscent, properly derivative, but other than that, I really didn't find anything above average in this episode. Thor, bro, I love your channels, I love Meme Mondays and Sailor Naboo, but I've come to the conclusion that in order to love this series, you really had to love Rebels. Because apparently nostalgia is blinding, we are so desperate, Disney has really warped us." Okay, the other one then came to us from Michael Cole, who said, "Hey Thor, if you want to know why I hate this show, it's just stupid and lazy writing. Compared to Andor, everything has a reason, a purpose, every character acts like a logical person. Here we have a woman running with pistols towards another woman with a lightsaber. That's dumb and 100% of dying. Robots punching other robots while having a gun. I hate this crap when stuff only happens to move the plot forward or to protect the protagonist because just one single person would act like a normal person. Ahsoka and Sabine are dead in each scene. It's poorly written, it's for kids who are not questioning stuff that happens. It's mind-blowing to me how a thinking adult can like this bullcrap. Here you have your answer." Alright, so first of all here, thank you to both of you. I appreciate the responses. They were candid and honest, and that's what I was looking for. Second of all, yeah, I've also had some questions when it comes to the writing. I went over a couple of my issues in a video the other day when I discussed things like the map and Ahsoka going outside of the ship and our bad guys firing at her instead of, just destroying the ship by firing at the engines or something. There have certainly been some interesting writing choices thus far. And though the last thing I want to do here is be that guy who goes, well, actually, there's an explanation for all that when it comes to some of the things you've both pointed out as issues, or that reverts to the whole Star Wars has always been on the childish side and the writing is supposed to be bad. That argument in particular is one I cannot stand and I have picked apart before. Though that said, and this is also an argument I've made before, but I don't think every piece of Star Wars content should be or even can be Andor, for example. I think Andor was an extremely rare gem, not just for Star Wars, but just for shows in general. Either way, I think you absolutely have room in Star Wars for a wide variety of different stories or different types of stories and different ways to present them. Star Wars is arguably more of a setting than it is a genre, which doesn't mean we should accept bad writing. But I do think, as I've also argued in a recent video, there is a difference between going for something a little more stylistic and fun, which Ahsoka is clearly meant to be, and which a lot of Star Wars has been, especially the animated stuff, which this is indeed related to or a continuation of. There's a difference between that and doing something that's meant to be more logical and gritty, which Andor is, of course, meant to be. And there is absolutely room for both in Star Wars, I think. And I mean, I love Andor. I don't think anything else Star Wars, especially films or shows, has achieved that level of writing before, save maybe The Empire Strikes Back. But even that has things like stormtroopers unable to hit anything at all during the Bespin escape. Even that has some thick plot armor and conveniences or contrivances for our heroes, like the city computer telling R2 the hyperdrive was deactivated on the Millennium Falcon, and him just having to essentially flip a switch for them to get away in the end. Then you have the prequels, where, for the most part, we knew exactly who had to live and die and where they were going to end up. Yet many still love those films despite all that, despite knowing some characters had absolutely impenetrable plot armor and others were destined to die or fall to the dark side. And again, I'm not trying to excuse all of the questionable writing in Ahsoka. I'm glad you two have pointed it out. Some of it even I didn't really think all too much about. And I do agree with some of the things you have indeed pointed out. Even knowing a character will live, there are still ways to generate tension with or around them. I mean, I think we all know Ahsoka is not going to die in this, neither is Sabine or some of these other characters, yet you can still do things that will generate tension. But I also think you have to keep in mind that, just in general, people don't always make the right choices, especially in the moment or with little to no time to think about it. I mean, there's always these questions asked after the fact by those who like to critique, and I certainly put myself into this category. But we ask things like, why did this character do this when this was the better choice in that moment and would have made more sense for the story or just for the character? And sometimes it just could be that, well, the character did something dumb, just like we people in real life sometimes do dumb things that after the fact we wonder why we did that or why we didn't see what was clearly a much better option. And don't get me wrong here, there is a very, very fine line. There's a fine line between the character did something dumb and the writer made them do something dumb to either move the plot along in the direction they wanted it to go, or they themselves missed the obvious, smarter choice the character would have and should have made. One of the reasons why I do love Andor so much is that, yeah, it is almost entirely character-driven. It all boils down to the choices made by the characters, and sometimes they make the wrong ones or bad ones that, as odd as it may sound, make a logical sense for the character because we feel like we understand the way the character thinks, and we get that they would screw up in that moment and do something that we would consider dumb. But I'm not entirely sure everything that, at face value perhaps, seems like a dumb choice made in the Ahsoka series here by one of the characters, that you two have pointed out many of them. I don't know that they are truly all bad or dumb. Sure, some of them absolutely are, but one example that was brought up was, why does Sabine run at Shin firing her pistols at the start of their fight in the most recent episode? And I guess I would ask, what did Sabine think was her best option in that moment, in those precious few seconds she had to consider her tactics against a Force user? Does she think holding her ground and firing was the best choice? And what happens if Shin simply ducks behind a tree and Force chokes her from afar and Sabine has no way to close on her to stop that because she's being choked to death? Or does she just open with her lightsaber and charge at Shin, even though she lost a lightsaber duel with her before? Or maybe what Sabine thinks is the best course of action in that moment is to run at her with blasters firing, hoping to maybe in close quarters get a lucky shot past the lightsabers of an unarmored Shin, wounding her just enough to perhaps level the playing field in what will almost inevitably come down to a lightsaber duel at some point between them. Plus, it could be that her Mandalorian training kicked in, and that's what, in the moment, either came to her or felt like her best option because that's what she'd been trained to do to fight Force users. In other words, we don't know what Sabine was thinking, which you could blame on the writer for not making it more clear that that was her best choice or best tactic. But either way, we don't know what she thought her best option was. And though, yeah, for a lot of us, running at a Force-sensitive lightsaber wielder is going to mean death, I don't think it automatically means that for someone who has been trained as much as Sabine in both Mandalorian tactics and with a lightsaber as a Jedi. Then it was also pointed out that there was no reason for Morgan to return to the ship while the map was still uploading. But perhaps she was needed there for a reason that wasn't explicitly told or shown to us, even if she was just standing around the bridge for dramatic effect. Or, maybe she wanted her paid goons to handle Ahsoka for her. Especially considering the last time Morgan fought Ahsoka, she lost and was captured. She might not be all that eager to fight Ahsoka again. And so to start to wrap this up, because again, I didn't want to turn into that well actually guy, but again, I agree, there's been some questionable writing here. But I think what this all boils down to, why some, including myself, I will admit, why we seem to be more forgiving of this show than, say, something like Kenobi, which I think should have absolutely been more on the Andor scale or side of things, instead of whatever it was, Well, I think it's because, consciously aware of it or not, I think a lot of us sort of expected the show to be more like this, to be more fun and stylistic, like its predecessor Rebels certainly was. We expected that far more than being more illogical and grim like Andor, even though a lot of us, including myself, also really enjoyed Andor. I really think having seen or not seen Rebels will, for some, maybe a lot of people, it'll have an impact on how much you end up enjoying this or not enjoying it, or how much you end up just kind of going with the flow or not going with it, or basically how much you're willing to let slide or not for the sake of enjoyment. And as I've also pointed out before, when you're liking something, for whatever reason you're liking it, even if you don't understand why you're liking it, you're going to tend to not notice the flaws or not want to notice the flaws or make up excuses or explanations for the things that don't make sense that you do notice. And when you're not enjoying something, again, for whatever reason, you tend to notice problems more and you want to find reasons why they don't and can't make sense. You want to pick it apart. You want to nitpick it. That's just how we are, and I think that has a lot to do with what's going on with the Ahsoka show right now. Well, that's all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. Why do fans seem to overlook some of the writing issues with Ahsoka that I would argue are absolutely there if you really want to notice them? Is it because we just want to like it, or is there another reason? Whatever you think, you know what to do. Leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.